Commander Thelnax stood at the front of the classroom, his 4 arms crossed behind his back. The old warrior's blue-gray skin was covered in scars. Each mark told a story of battle, of survival, of pain. The young Vaxir cadets sat quietly, their large eyes fixed on him. They wanted to hear about the war. They wanted to hear about humans. Thelnax did not want to talk about humans. Even after 15 years, the memories made his blood run cold. But the academy commanders had ordered him to speak. The young ones needed to know. They needed to understand what humans were really like. "Sit down," Thelnax said, his voice rough like gravel. "What I'm going to tell you will sound impossible. You will think I'm lying. You will think I'm exaggerating. I wish I was." He activated the holographic display. An image appeared in the air. It showed a space station, twisted metal and broken glass floating in the darkness. Kepler Station. Thelnax remembered it well, too well. This was supposed to be simple, he began. Human insurgents had taken Kepler Station. Our mission was to retake it. We had 200 soldiers, Vaxir, Quelix, and Mordian troops. The best warriors from 3 different species. The humans inside numbered maybe 40, maybe 50. We thought it would be easy. A young cadet raised one of her hands. "Commander, why was it not easy?" "Meinge, meinge, 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 meinge." Thelnax's mandibles clicked together, a sign of stress among his people. Because humans don't die when they should. He changed the image. Now it showed temperature readings and atmospheric data. The numbers were terrible. No oxygen. Temperatures far below freezing. Radiation levels that would kill most species in hours. The insurgents cut all power to the station, Thelnax explained. They destroyed the life support systems. They did this themselves. Do you understand? They made their own environment deadly. This was 11 days before we arrived. The cadets looked confused. One of them spoke up. "Commander, how could they survive 11 days without life support?" "That's what we thought too," Thelnax said quietly. "We thought we would find corpses. We thought they had killed themselves rather than surrender. We were wrong." He remembered entering the station. His squad had been careful, moving through the dark corridors with weapons ready. But it was too quiet. The cold bit through their armor. Ice covered the walls. Their breath came out in white clouds. "I was working with a human sergeant," Thelnax continued. "His name was Tae-sung Kim. Small fellow, by Vaxir standards. Quiet. He worked in logistics, managing supplies and equipment. Nothing special, I thought. Just a paper pusher. In uniform." The commander's voice grew softer. "We found the first insurgent in a storage bay. He was wrapped in plastic sheets and tape, making a crude pressure suit. He was alive. He had a rifle. And when he saw us, he started shooting. But, Commander," another cadet interrupted, "without proper life support gear, his blood should have boiled. His lungs should have collapsed." "I know," Thelnax said. "That's what I thought too. But he kept fighting. We had to put him down. When we checked his body, we found something impossible. His lung was punctured. He had sealed the wound with emergency foam, the kind we use to patch hull breaches. Then, he just kept fighting." The classroom was completely silent now. The young Vaxir stared at their commander with wide eyes. "His name was Jin-Woo Park," Thelnax said. "We found his identification later. He was 19 years old. 19. He should have been crying for his mother, not fighting in near vacuum with a collapsed lung." Sergeant Tae-sung had barely reacted when they found Park's body. He had simply checked the man's tags, closed his eyes, and kept moving. Later, Thelnax learned this was normal for humans. They grieved quickly and kept working. They had to. Survival required it. "We found more of them as we moved deeper," Thelnax continued. "All of them wrapped in makeshift suits. All of them still fighting. They had been rationing oxygen from emergency tanks, taking turns in the few pressurized rooms that still worked. Eating frozen rations. Drinking melted ice. He paused, remembering. One woman had frostbite so severe that 3 of her fingers had turned black. Dead tissue. She was still operating a machine gun with her ruined hands. The commander changed the hologram again. This time, it showed a human female in medical uniform. She was small, with dark hair pulled back tightly. Her face was calm, almost bored. "This is Hee-Rin Choi," Thelnax said. "Human combat medic. After we secured the station, she treated the wounded. Both the insurgents and our soldiers. I watched her work on a Mordian soldier who had taken shrapnel to his chest cavity. He was dying. Anyone could see it. She patched him up in 6 minutes, Thelnax said, shaking his head. 6 minutes. Then she moved to the next patient, a Quelix with a severed limb. She stopped the bleeding, sealed the wound, and moved on again. She worked for 14 hours straight. One of the cadets asked, "Was she not tired?" "Of course she was tired," Thelnax snapped. "But humans don't stop when they're tired. They stop when the work is done." He remembered asking Hee-Rin about one of the insurgents. The man had a sucking chest wound, blood bubbling from his ribs with each breath. It looked fatal. Thelnax had seen such wounds before. They always ended the same way. But Hee-Rin had simply shrugged. "Oh, he'll be fine," she had said casually. "It's just a sucking chest wound. I've seen worse. Just a sucking chest wound." As if having a hole in your chest was a minor inconvenience. "I asked Sergeant Taesung why humans were like this," Thelnax told his students. "Why they could endure so much pain, so much suffering. Why they refused to die when any reasonable being would give up." The commander's 4 eyes grew distant. "He told me about Earth, their homeworld. He called it a death world. A planet so hostile, so dangerous, that simply living there was a constant battle. Diseases that could kill in days. Predators that hunted in packs. Weather that could freeze you solid or boil you alive. Earthquakes. Volcanoes. Hurricanes. Floods. Humans evolved to survive all of that," Thelnax said. "They didn't develop natural armor like us. They didn't develop venom or claws or thick hides. Instead, they developed something else. Something more terrifying." He looked at each cadet in turn. They developed the ability to simply refuse to quit. To look at certain death and say, "Not today." To take wounds that should be fatal and treat them as minor problems. To endure the unendurable. The classroom remained silent. The young Vaxir were trying to process this information. It went against everything they knew about biology, about psychology, about the limits of living beings. "This was just the first day," Thelnax said quietly. "The first time I encountered humans in combat. I thought I understood warfare. I had fought in 6 campaigns before this. I had faced enemies of all kinds. But humans were different." He deactivated the hologram. "That's enough for today. Tomorrow, I'll tell you about the long march, about what happened when we had to cross 240 kilometers of hostile terrain with no supplies, about how the humans carried us when we couldn't go on." The commander turned to leave, then stopped. He looked back at his students. "If you learn nothing else from these lectures, learn this. Humans are not like us. They don't think like us. They don't feel pain like us. And they absolutely do not give up like any sensible being would." "Are they our enemies?" one brave cadet asked. Thelnax was quiet for a long moment. "No," he finally said. "Thank the void. No. They're our allies. And you should pray they stay that way." The next day, Commander Thelnax returned to the classroom. The young cadets were already seated, waiting eagerly. Word had spread about yesterday's lecture. Now even more students had crowded into the room, sitting on the floor and standing along the walls. They all wanted to hear more about humans. Thelnax said nothing as he walked to the front. He simply activated another holographic display. This one showed a barren landscape, all red dust and jagged rocks stretching to the horizon. It looked dead, lifeless. Theta Outpost, Thelnax said. A forward operating base, on the edge of disputed territory. 200 troops stationed there, 50 humans, 150 of various other species, including 30 of our own Vaxier warriors. He zoomed in on the image, showing a cluster of buildings huddled together against the hostile environment. The enemy came at night. Overwhelming force. They didn't want the outpost. They wanted to cut our supply lines. They destroyed our landing pads, our vehicles, our communication arrays, everything. A cadet raised her hand. Did you evacuate? We tried, Thelnax said grimly. But the nearest safe zone was 240 kilometers away. Across that, he gestured at the wasteland on the display. No roads, no shelter, no water sources, just rock and dust and heat. The commander's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. In Vaxier military doctrine, a soldier can march 30 kilometers before requiring significant rest. The Quelix can manage 40 if conditions are good. The Mordians, with their thick legs, can do maybe 35. 240 kilometers meant multiple days of travel, he continued. With rest periods, with our wounded, we estimated 6 days minimum. But we didn't have 6 days. Enemy patrols were hunting for survivors. Every hour we stayed meant more danger. Thelnax changed the image to show personnel files. Faces appeared. Human faces. I want you to remember these names. Private Donghyun Lee, Corporal Sun Mi Yang, Lieutenant Yujin Han, Captain Sangwoo Kwan. These 4 humans changed everything I thought I knew about endurance, he said quietly. The march had started at dawn. The mixed force of 200 troops had formed up, carrying what supplies they could. The wounded were placed on portable sleds that could hover a few inches off the ground. Thelnax remembered the heat already building, the sweat beginning to form on his skin. The humans took point, Thelnax said. Captain Sangwoo Kwan led from the front. I was near the middle of the column with the other Vaxier. We moved at a steady pace. Professional. Organized. By the 30-kilometer mark, I was tired, he admitted. My legs ached. The heat was oppressive. I saw other Vaxiers slowing down too. The Quelix were struggling. Even the Mordians looked exhausted. He paused. The humans looked fine, not even breathing hard. One of the cadets spoke up. Perhaps they were hiding their fatigue? Trying to appear strong? Where are Fendiv now? Thelnax made a sound that might have been a laugh. That's what I thought too. But I was wrong. At 50 kilometers, we called for a rest. The alien troops collapsed where they stood. Some couldn't even remove their packs. They just fell over. The humans? He shook his head. They drank some water, ate some rations, and then started helping set up the perimeter. I watched Private Donghyun Lee walk the entire defensive line, checking positions. He had just marched 50 kilometers. He should have been resting, but he just kept going. The commander's voice grew softer. At 80 kilometers, we started rotating troops onto the sleds. The Vaxier, the Quelix, the Mordians. Everyone was exhausted. Our feet were bleeding. Our muscles were screaming. We had to rest every 5 kilometers now. The humans carried us, Thelnax said simply. They pulled the sleds. They supported the ones who could barely walk. Corporal Sun Mi Yang, this tiny woman who barely came up to my chest. She helped a Mordian warrior twice her size keep moving. He remembered asking her if she was tired. She had looked at him with confusion, as if the question didn't make sense. Tired? Sure. But we keep moving anyway, as if it was that simple. As if you could just decide not to be tired and your body would obey. Lieutenant Yujin Han had a shattered leg, Thelnax continued. She had been injured in the initial attack. The medics had stabilized it, wrapped it in a support brace. She should have been on a sled. Really. 17. Really. Repetine. Really de spirit. She refused, he said. She marched on that broken leg for 240 kilometers. I watched her. Every step caused pain. I could see it on her face. But she never stopped, never complained, just kept putting one foot in front of the other. The cadets looked disturbed. One of them asked, "Why would she do that? Why cause herself such pain?" I asked her that, Thelnax said. She told me, "Someone else needs the sled more than me. I can walk." That was her logic. Simple, direct, completely insane by any reasonable standard. The commander walked slowly across the front of the classroom. After 100 kilometers, something changed. The humans entered what they call a second wind. I don't understand the physiology, but it was like watching machines activate. They had been tired before, moving steadily but clearly fatigued, he explained. Then suddenly, they just kept going. Hour after hour. They didn't speed up, but they didn't slow down either. Just constant, relentless forward movement. Thelnax remembered the second night. They had made camp in a small canyon. The alien troops had collapsed immediately, falling into exhausted sleep. The humans had set up defenses, cooked food, tended wounds, and then divided into watch shifts. I woke up in the middle of the night, he said. I saw Private Donghyun on watch. I went to relieve him, told him to rest. He said he wasn't tired enough to sleep yet. After marching 120 kilometers. Not tired enough to sleep, Thelnax repeated. I had barely been able to move. My entire body felt like it was on fire, and this human, who had marched the same distance while helping others, wasn't tired enough to sleep. The third day had been worse. The heat had intensified. 2 Quelix had collapsed from heat stroke. A Vaxier had sprained both ankles. The sleds were full. Everyone who could walk had to walk. Captain Sang Wuquan picked up one of our Vaxier warriors, Thelnax said. Just picked him up and carried him, on his back, for 60 kilometers. The commander's voice was filled with something like awe. I watched him do it. This human carried a fully grown Vaxier warrior, in full armor, across 60 kilometers of desert. And when I asked if he needed help, he just smiled and said, I've got him. On the 4th day, we were all delirious, Thelnax continued. Vaxier, Quelix, Mordian. We were shuffling forward like the walking dead. Some of us were hallucinating from exhaustion. I remember thinking I was going to die out there in that wasteland. The humans were still walking normally, he said. Still alert. Still helping others. Corporal Sunmi Yang was singing. Singing. I asked her why. He paused. She said it helped pass the time. Helped keep everyone's spirits up. She had been marching for 4 days straight. And she was worried about our spirits. The cadets were completely silent. They couldn't imagine such endurance. It went against everything they understood about physical limitations. We reached the evacuation point on the evening of the 4th day, Thelnax said. 240 kilometers in 96 hours. Every non-human was barely conscious. We had to be carried onto the transport ships. The humans walked onto the ships under their own power, he continued. Then they helped load the wounded. Then they helped secure equipment. Lieutenant Yujin Han, with her shattered leg, worked for another 2 hours before she finally sat down. Thelnax looked at his students. Later, I learned about human evolution. They called it persistence hunting. Their ancestors would pick an animal and just follow it. For hours, for days, until the animal literally died of exhaustion. The prey would run away. Fast and powerful, he explained. But eventually, it would have to stop. It would be tired. The humans would catch up. The animal would run again. The humans would follow. Over and over until the animal's body gave out. Humans evolved to outlast anything. Thelnak said quietly. Their bodies can keep going by consuming their own muscles, their own fat. They have mental tricks to override exhaustion, something they call mind over matter. A cadet asked nervously. Commander, do humans feel fatigue? Like we do? They feel it. Thelnax assured them. I asked Captain Sang-woo about it later. He said he was exhausted. His feet were covered in blisters. His muscles were damaged. His back was in agony from carrying our warrior. But he kept going anyway, the commander said. That's the difference. We stop when our bodies tell us to stop. Humans stop when they decide to stop. Their body's opinion on the matter is secondary. He deactivated the hologram. Captain Sang-woo Kwon told me something I'll never forget. He said, pain is temporary. Pride is forever. We weren't going to leave anyone behind. That's the human philosophy, Thelnak said. They choose to ignore their body's limits. They choose to endure impossible hardship. They choose to carry their wounded rather than leave them. The classroom remained quiet for a long moment. Finally, one cadet spoke. Commander, are all humans like this? Thelnax considered the question. No, he said honestly. Not all humans are soldiers. Not all are warriors. But even their civilians have this capability. It's built into their species. Evolution made them this way. Avrtha, we see have won. Tomorrow, he said as he prepared to leave. I'll tell you about their pain tolerance, about what happened when I was wounded, about the human medic who saved my life while dying himself. He paused at the door. And you'll understand why fighting against humans is a nightmare. Because they don't just endure. They endure while helping others do the same. Commander Thelnax entered the classroom more slowly today. His movements were careful, deliberate. When he reached the front, he unbuttoned his uniform jacket and pulled it open. The young cadets gasped. His torso was covered in scars, but two stood out. On his left side, two of his forearms ended in stumps just below the shoulder. The scar tissue was thick and twisted, like melted wax frozen in place. The Corvin wastes, Thelnax said quietly, letting his jacket fall closed again. Year 6 of the war. Routine patrol through canyon country. 40 soldiers. Mixed unit, as usual. 20 humans, 20 various others. He activated the hologram, showing a narrow canyon with high walls of red rock. We were ambushed. The enemy had waited above us, on the canyon rim. Smart tactics. We were trapped in a kill zone. The commander's voice grew distant, remembering. The first plasma bolt hit me. It severed 2 of my arms instantly. The second one hit my thorax. Burned right through my armor. I went down. I've been in combat before, he said. I've been wounded before. But this was different. The pain was beyond anything I had experienced. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe properly. I was certain I was going to die. Thelnax looked at his students. I was lying there in the dirt, bleeding out, and all I could think was that I wanted the pain to stop. I wanted it to be over. I was ready to die if it meant the pain would end. The classroom was absolutely silent. Every cadet knew that pain tolerance was a matter of honor among warriors. To admit such weakness was rare. Then I heard someone running, Thelnax continued. Through the plasma fire, through the explosions. Someone was running toward me. I thought I was hallucinating. He changed the hologram to show a personnel file. A human male, young, with a serious expression. Staff Sergeant Hyun Sik Bai, human combat medic, 32 years old. He reached me and immediately started working, Thelnax said. His hands were fast, precise. He was applying coagulant to my wounds, wrapping pressure bandages, talking to me the whole time. The commander remembered the words, that calm, almost bored voice. He kept saying, "You're gonna be fine, buddy. I've seen worse. Just stay with me." I could barely focus on his words, Thelnax admitted. The pain was overwhelming. But I noticed something. His uniform was torn. There were holes in it. Dark stains that looked like blood. I realized he had been shot, the commander said. 3 times. I could see the entry wounds. But he was working on me as if nothing was wrong. His hands weren't shaking. His voice was steady. Thelnax shook his head in disbelief, even after all these years. I tried to tell him he was wounded. He just laughed. Laughed. He said, "I've had worse hangovers, buddy. You're gonna be fine." A cadet raised her hand timidly. "Commander, how could he function with gunshot wounds? That's what I wanted to know." Thelnax said. Later, much later, I learned the truth. But in that moment, I just watched him work. He stabilized me, then moved to the next casualty. A Mordian soldier with his leg nearly blown off. The commander's voice was filled with something like reverence. Sergeant Hyun-sik worked through that entire battle. He crawled from casualty to casualty. 6 wounded soldiers, 2 Vaxir, 3 Mordian, 1 Quelix. All of us critical. All of us dying. He saved all of us, Thelnax said simply. Every single one, while bleeding from 3 gunshot wounds. The hologram changed to show a medical readout. The technical details were dense, but certain words stood out. Collapsed lung, shattered rib, internal bleeding. This was Sergeant Hyun-sik's medical report, Thelnax explained. 1 bullet had collapsed his lung. Another had broken 2 ribs and caused internal bleeding. The third had torn through his shoulder muscle. He worked for 2 hours with these injuries, the commander said. 2 hours. Crawling through combat, dragging equipment, performing field surgery. All while his own lung was collapsed. A cadet spoke up, sounding disturbed. That should be impossible. The pain alone should have caused shock-induced unconsciousness. I know. Thelnax agreed. When the battle ended, and we secured the area, I watched the other human medics work on Sergeant Hyun-sik. He refused treatment at first, kept saying others needed help first. They had to order him to lie down. The commander remembered that moment clearly. The sergeant, lying on the ground, finally still. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, but when another wounded soldier cried out, he had tried to get up again. They had to physically hold him down. Thelnax said, Even with a collapsed lung, even bleeding internally, his instinct was to help others first. The hologram changed again, showing a human female in a white medical coat. She was older, with gray streaking through her dark hair. Her expression was serious, but not unkind. Dr. Ji-won Song, Thelnax said, Human Chief Medical Officer. After the battle, I had many questions. She answered them. He remembered that conversation well. It had changed how he understood humans forever. I asked her how Sergeant Hyun-sik could function with such injuries, the commander said. She showed me charts, diagrams, medical scans. She explained human physiology. Humans produce combat drugs naturally, Thelnax explained to his students. Chemicals called adrenaline, endorphins, cortisol. When they're in danger, their bodies flood with these chemicals. Adrenaline increases their strength and speed, he continued. Endorphins suppress pain. Cortisol helps them focus. It's an automatic response. Their bodies, preparing for battle. A cadet asked, But surely those chemicals run out. Surely the body cannot maintain such a state. They do run out, Thelnax confirmed. And when they do, humans crash. Hard. Sergeant Hyun-sik was unconscious for 2 days after the battle. His body had pushed beyond its limits and needed time to recover. But during the battle, He felt almost no pain. The commander said. Dr. G1 showed me brain scans. The human brain can literally shut off pain signals when necessary. They call it adrenaline override. He changed the hologram to show historical footage. Humans throughout their history, fighting with terrible wounds. A soldier with a missing arm, still firing his weapon. Another dragging herself forward despite a shattered leg. A medic treating others while blood poured from his own wounds. Dr. G1 showed me these. Thelnax said quietly. Thousands of years of human warfare. Thousands of examples of humans fighting through injuries that should be fatal. She told me about something called battlefield medicine, he continued. Humans have been patching each other up in combat for their entire history. They've learned how to keep fighting, how to keep their companions fighting. The footage showed a human soldier with a piece of metal sticking out of his chest. He was still running, still shooting. Another had burns covering half his body. He was helping carry a wounded friend. And a Skeller, 39. And a Skeller have a bat. The Rentan. And a Skeller have a bat. I asked Dr. G1 if humans feel pain like other species. Thelnax said. She said yes. They feel it just as intensely. Maybe more, because their nervous system is so sensitive, but they can choose to ignore it, the commander explained. It's a mental ability. They call it mind over matter, or grit, or toughness. Different words for the same concept. The ability to acknowledge pain and then decide it doesn't matter. He looked at his students. Imagine feeling the worst pain of your life. Pain so intense you can't think. Now imagine deciding that pain is irrelevant, that you have a job to do, and the pain is just background noise. That's what humans do, Thelnax said. Not sometimes. Regularly. It's normal for them. A cadet spoke nervously. Commander, do they have sayings about this? About ignoring pain? Many, Thelnax confirmed. Dr. G1 told me some of them. Pain is just weakness leaving the body. Suck it up, Buttercup. Rub some dirt on it. Walk it off. These are things they say to each other, he explained. Encouragement to ignore injury and keep going. It's part of their culture, especially in their military. The commander's voice grew softer. I asked Sergeant Hyun-sik about it later, after he recovered. I asked him how he could work with such terrible wounds. How he could ignore the pain. He looked confused by the question, Thelnax said. He told me. There were people who needed help. The pain didn't matter. It would still be there after I finished my job, so why worry about it during? As if pain was an appointment he could reschedule, the commander said, shaking his head. As if a collapsed lung was a minor inconvenience to deal with later. He deactivated the hologram. This is what you need to understand about humans. They don't have a higher pain tolerance. Their nerves work the same as ours. They feel pain intensely. But they have the ability to simply not care, Thelnax said. To feel pain and decide it's irrelevant. To acknowledge injury and continue anyway. A cadet asked quietly, Is that not insane? Is that not a form of mental illness? By our standards? Perhaps, Thelnax admitted. But for humans, it's survival. Their planet taught them that stopping meant dying. So, they learned not to stop. Sergeant Hyun-sik saved my life, the commander said, touching his scarred torso. He did it while dying himself. And when I thanked him later, he seemed embarrassed. He said he was just doing his job. Just doing his job, Thelnax repeated. As if saving 6 lives while critically wounded was routine. As if it was nothing special. He looked at each cadet. That's the terrifying part. For humans, it is routine. It is nothing special. They expect this level of performance from themselves and each other. Dr. G1 told me something else, the commander said. She told me that Sergeant Hyun-sik would receive a commendation for his actions, but that dozens of other human medics had done similar things in the same battle. Dozens, he emphasized. Fighting through injuries that should be fatal. Saving others while dying themselves. And it was just another day at work for them. The classroom remained quiet for a long time. Finally, Thelnax spoke again. "Tomorrow, I'll tell you about human tactical thinking," he said. "About how they approach warfare differently than any other species. About why fighting against them is not just physically challenging, but mentally exhausting. But remember this," he added. "Humans feel pain. They fear death. They're not machines. They're living beings who simply refuse to let those facts stop them from doing what needs to be done." He began to leave, then paused. "And pray. You never have to fight against them, because an enemy who refuses to acknowledge pain, who keeps coming no matter how badly you hurt them, is the most terrifying enemy imaginable." Commander Thelnax stood before his students again. The classroom had grown even more crowded. Word of his lectures had spread throughout the academy. Young warriors from other species had joined the Vaxir cadets, all wanting to hear about humans. "Today, I'm going to tell you why humans are terrifying opponents," Thelnax began. "Not because of their endurance or pain tolerance. Those are advantages, yes. But what makes humans truly dangerous is how they think." He activated the hologram. It showed a military outpost, surrounded by defensive walls and guard towers. Firebase 7. The commander remembered it clearly. Too clearly. Firebase 7 was a human-led position, he explained. 120 soldiers defending it. 50 humans. 70 from other species including myself. Good defensive position. Well supplied. Strong fortifications. The hologram zoomed out, showing red markers surrounding the base. Thousands of them. The Krellian assault force. 1,200 soldiers. Well-trained. Well-equipped. They had armor, artillery, air support. We had walls and determination. A cadet spoke up. "Commander, at 12 to 1 odds, standard doctrine is to surrender." "Exactly," Thelnax agreed. "Galactic military doctrine is clear. When outnumbered more than 3 to 1, surrender becomes acceptable. Honor is preserved. Lives are saved. It makes sense." "I told this to the human commander," he continued. Major Bora Shin. Small woman. Very young for her rank. I explained that we should negotiate terms. Save lives. Fight another day. The commander's mandibles clicked, a sign of remembered unease. She looked at me. Then she looked at the enemy force on her tactical display. Then she smiled. That smile, Thelnax said quietly, was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. The hologram showed Major Borashin's personnel file. She looked calm in the photo. Professional. But Thelnax remembered that smile, and it still made his blood cold. She studied the enemy for 6 minutes, he said. Just stared at the tactical display, occasionally zooming in on certain sections. Then she called her officers together and started giving orders. I thought she was planning our defense, Thelnax admitted, preparing to make them pay dearly for the base before we surrendered. But that's not what she was doing. The commander changed the hologram to show the battle plan. It looked insane. She identified 3 things about the Krellian force. First, they relied heavily on a centralized command network. All their units coordinated through a main hub. Second, their ammunition depot was poorly positioned. Too close to their command center. Built above ground for easy access. Efficient, but vulnerable. Third, the Krellian commander was arrogant. He thought we would surrender. He wasn't expecting resistance. Thelnax looked at his students. Major Bo-Ra planned to turn all 3 of these facts into weapons against them. He remembered the briefing. The human major speaking calmly, as if she was discussing lunch plans rather than a battle against overwhelming odds. She sent a team to infiltrate enemy lines, Thelnax said. Lieutenant Taejin Wu and 5 soldiers. I thought this was suicide. The Krellian had guards everywhere. Patrols, sensors. The humans stole Krellian armor from a previous battle, he explained. They wore it. Walked right into enemy territory, pretending to be Krellian scouts. Returning from patrol, a cadet asked incredulously. They just walked in? They just walked in, Thelnax confirmed. Humans are good at deception. They study it, practice it, use it regularly. They call it psychological warfare. Lieutenant Tajin's team reached the ammunition depot. The commander continued. They set explosive charges. But here's where it gets interesting. They didn't set them to explode all at once. The hologram showed a timing sequence. The charges were set to detonate in a specific pattern. A rhythm. Boom, 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 boom. Like a signal. Major Bo-Ra had calculated that this pattern would disrupt the Krellian command network, Thelnax explained. The electromagnetic pulses from the explosions, timed correctly, would create interference. Not much. Just 47 seconds of disruption. 47 seconds, he repeated. Most commanders wouldn't even notice such a brief window. But humans fight in seconds, not minutes. The commander's voice grew animated as he described the battle. The moment the first explosion hit, Major Bo-Ra launched her attack. Not a full assault. 3 precise strikes at 3 specific points. She hit their command post with long-range fire, he explained. Not to destroy it, but to force them to move their commanders. While they were relocating, and their network was disrupted, she couldn't coordinate effectively. Simultaneously, she sent a strike team to destroy their artillery. Thelnax continued. Just 8 soldiers, including herself. They moved fast, used the chaos as cover, and disabled 6 artillery pieces in under 2 minutes. The third strike targeted their air support, he said. Anti-aircraft fire concentrated on their landing zone. Damaged 3 aircraft. Destroyed 1. Made the others pull back. The hologram showed the battle unfolding. It looked like controlled chaos. All of this happened in those 47 seconds of network disruption. Before the Krellian could respond, they had lost their artillery. Their air support was grounded, and their command structure was confused. Then Major Bo-Ra pulled everyone back to the base, Thelnax said. The Krellian regrouped and prepared to assault. But now they had to do it without artillery support, without air superiority, and with a shaken command structure. They still had overwhelming numbers, a cadet pointed out. True. Thelnax agreed. But numbers aren't everything. Major Bo-Ra had studied the Krellian psychology. They were proud warriors. They believed in honorable combat. She used that against them. The commander explained how the battle continued. The Krellian attacked in waves, as their doctrine required. Organized, disciplined advances. And Major Bo-Ra picked them apart. She knew where they would attack because she knew their doctrine, he said. She positioned forces to counter each wave. Used crossfire. Created kill zones. Forced them into bad positions. The Krellian lost 300 soldiers in the first assault, Thelnax stated. They pulled back, regrouped, tried again. Lost another 200. By the third assault, their morale was breaking. He changed the hologram to show the final moments of the battle. The Krellian commander called for retreat. He had lost over half his force. His artillery was destroyed. His air support was useless. And the base still stood. We lost 14 soldiers, Thelnax said quietly. 14. Against a force 12 times our size. Major Bo-Ra had turned an impossible situation into a victory. The classroom was silent. The cadets were trying to process this information. It went against everything they had learned about warfare. I asked Major Bo-Ra how she did it. The commander said. She told me something I'll never forget. She said, war isn't about strength. It's about finding your enemy's weakness and exploiting it. This is how humans think, Thelnax explained to his students. They don't accept the situation as it is. They look for angles, for opportunities, for ways to change the equation. Every species in the galaxy has military doctrine, he continued. Rules for how to fight, when to retreat, how to respond to situations. These doctrines are logical, proven, sensible. Humans study everyone's doctrine, Thelnax said. They learn how we fight. Then they figure out how to break those patterns. The hologram changed to show historical data, thousands of years of human warfare. Humans have been fighting each other for their entire history. They've developed more ways to kill, more strategies, more tactics than any other species. They have professionals called military theorists, the commander explained. People who do nothing but think about warfare, how to fight better, how to win against impossible odds, how to turn defeats into victories. A cadet asked nervously. How many of these theorists do they have? Thousands, Thelnax said. Throughout their history, and modern humans study all of them. They read books written thousands of years ago about ancient battles and apply those lessons to modern warfare. He showed images of human military academies. They teach warfare the way we teach mathematics, as a science, as an art. They analyze every battle, learn from every mistake, refine every technique. I met a human sergeant named Yunho Park, Thelnax said. Regular soldier, nothing special. We were talking about military history. He casually mentioned that his ancestor fought in something called the Korean War. I asked about this war, the commander continued. He told me it involved millions of soldiers. Millions. Fighting for 3 years. On one peninsula, the cadets looked shocked. Millions? One asked. For 3 years? In one location? That's a small war by human standards, Thelnax said grimly. They've had conflicts involving tens of millions. Wars that lasted decades. Battles where more soldiers died in a single day than we lose in entire campaigns. Earth has never known true peace, he explained. Somewhere on that planet, humans have been fighting continuously for all of recorded history. They are always at war somewhere. A cadet spoke up, sounding disturbed. Commander, are humans naturally violent? Do they enjoy combat? Thelnax considered the question carefully. No, he said finally. Most humans hate violence. But they're very good at it because they've had to be. Their planet made them fight to survive. Then they fought each other. They've been perfecting the art of warfare for thousands of years. This is why they're terrifying opponents, the commander said. It's not just their physical abilities. It's their minds. They think about warfare differently. Where we see insurmountable odds, they see problems to solve, he explained. Where we see acceptable losses, they see unacceptable failure. Where we see honorable surrender, they see another option to try. The hologram showed Major Bo Shin again. I asked her if she was afraid during the battle. She said yes. Of course, she was afraid. 12-to-1 odds should terrify anyone. But she fought anyway, Thelnax said. She analyzed the situation, found a solution, and executed it perfectly. Fear didn't stop her. Impossible odds didn't stop her. Logic that said she should surrender. This is the human approach to warfare, he concluded. Acknowledge the fear, analyze the situation, find a way to win, and then do it regardless of the cost. He looked at his students. Tomorrow, I'll tell you the final story, about why I chose to fight alongside humans instead of against them, about what they fight for and why that makes them even more dangerous. But understand this, Thelnax said seriously. Everything I've told you about human endurance, pain, tolerance, and tactical thinking is true. But it's not the most important thing about them. The most important thing, he said quietly, is what they choose to use these abilities for. And that's what makes them either your greatest ally or your worst nightmare. Commander Thelnax walked into the classroom for the final time. The room was packed beyond capacity. Cadets sat on the floor, stood against the walls, filled the doorway. Even senior officers had come to hear the conclusion of his story. He said nothing at first, just stood there, looking at all these young faces, warriors who had never experienced real combat, who thought they understood what war meant. "You've asked me questions this week," Thelnax began. "About human endurance, about their pain tolerance, about their tactical thinking. But today, someone is going to ask me a different question." He looked directly at a young Vaxier cadet in the front row. "You. Ask me the question." The cadet hesitated, confused. "Commander, I don't know what question you mean." "Yes, you do," Thelnax said. "You've been thinking it for days. All of you have. Ask me." The young cadet swallowed nervously. "If humans are so terrifying, so dangerous, so good at warfare, why do you fight alongside them, instead of against them?" "There it is," Thelnax said quietly. "The real question. The one that matters." He activated the hologram one final time. It showed a massive space station, beautiful and peaceful. Gardens visible through the transparent sections. Ships docked peacefully at the ports. "Colony Haven," the commander said. "A civilian refugee station. Built during the war to house non-combatants, displaced by the fighting. 40,000 people lived here. Vaxier, Quelix, Mordian, human, and a dozen other species. Families, children, elderly, the vulnerable." The hologram changed, showing red markers approaching. Many red markers. Enemy fleet. 15,000 soldiers. They wanted the station, not for strategic value, for the propaganda, for the message it would send. They sent a communication, Thelnax continued. "Surrender the station. Military personnel would be executed. Civilians would be spared, relocated for forced labor." "They gave us 12 hours to decide," a cadet spoke up. "Commander, what were your defensive capabilities?" 800 soldiers, Thelnax said. "Mixed forces, 400 humans, 400 various other species, against 15,000. Almost 20-to-1 odds," someone whispered. "Yes," Thelnax confirmed. "I was there, as a tactical advisor." The senior officers gathered to discuss terms. The math was simple. We couldn't win. We couldn't hold long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Surrender was the logical choice. He changed the hologram to show a personnel file. A human female, older, with steel-gray hair and hard eyes. Colonel Hai Jin Nam. Human commanding officer. She listened to everyone's arguments. Heard all the logic about why surrender was necessary. Then she said one word, Thelnax recalled. "No." The commander's voice was filled with remembered awe. "Explained that we could save civilian lives through surrender." "She looked at each of us," he said. Then she asked a question. "Do you believe they'll actually spare the civilians?" We had no answer. Enemy promises in wartime are worthless. We all knew it. Colonel Haijin said, "We didn't come this far to abandon them now." Thelnax continued. Then she started giving orders. "Prepare defenses. Evacuate non-essential personnel. Get ready to hold the line." A cadet asked, "Did you argue with her? Try to change her mind?" "I did," Thelnax admitted. "I told her this was suicide. That we would all die for nothing. That surrender was the honorable option." "She agreed with me," the commander said. "She knew we would probably die. She knew the odds. But she also knew that surrender meant condemning 40,000 civilians to slavery. Maybe death. So she chose to fight," he said simply. "And when I saw the determination in her eyes, I understood something. This wasn't about tactics or strategy. This was about something deeper." The hologram showed the battle preparations. Defensive positions being strengthened. Weapons being distributed. Civilians being evacuated to the safest areas. The humans worked without rest, Thelnax said. 48 hours straight. Preparing the station. They fortified every corridor, every junction, every room. They built firing positions, set traps, created kill zones. And they sang while they worked, he added. Humans sing when they're afraid. When they know death is coming. They sing to keep their spirits up. The commander remembered those songs. Sad, haunting melodies about home, about sacrifice, about fighting for something bigger than yourself. The enemy arrived on schedule. Thelnax continued. They demanded surrender. Colonel Heejin's response was to open fire. That's how the battle started. Thanks for watching this video. They are. The hologram showed the combat. Wave after wave of enemy soldiers. 800 defenders holding impossible positions. We held them at the docking ports, made them fight for every meter of station. The humans were everywhere. Rallying defenders. Coordinating fire. Refusing to give ground. I fought alongside a human private, Thelnax said. Mi Sun Cho. Just finished basic training. Should have been terrified. She was terrified. I could see it on her face. But she kept fighting, he continued. Her squad was holding a corridor junction. Critical position. If it fell, the enemy could flank our entire defensive line. The commander's voice grew quiet. Her entire squad died in the first day. 8 soldiers. All dead except her. She was alone at that junction. And the enemy kept coming. She held it for 20 minutes, Thelnax said. 1 human soldier, against dozens of enemies. She used the bodies of her fallen squad as cover, fired until her weapon overheated, switched to another. When she ran out of ammunition, she used grenades. I was trying to reach her with reinforcements, he explained. We could hear her over the radio. She was singing. This young woman, barely trained, certain she was going to die, was singing while she fought. A cadet asked quietly, "What happened to her?" "We reached her," Thelnax said. She'd been shot 11 times. Both legs, her abdomen, her shoulder, her arm. She was still firing with one hand, using her weapon as a crutch with the other. She looked at us and smiled. The commander said. Smiled. Covered in blood. Shot to pieces. And she smiled. She said, "Took you guys long enough. I was getting tired." She had saved 200 civilians who were sheltering behind that junction, Thelnax continued. 200 people who would have died if she had fallen back. If she had done the sensible thing and retreated. The hologram showed the progression of the battle. 6 days of continuous combat. The defenders being pushed back slowly, but never breaking. We lost ground meter by meter, Thelnax said. But we made them pay for every centimeter. The humans refused to give up any position without a fight. They held rooms until they ran out of ammunition. Then they held them with knives. Then with their bare hands. I saw a human sergeant hold a doorway alone, he said. Out of bullets. Wounded. Exhausted. 3 enemy soldiers came at him. He beat them to death with his helmet. On day 4, I was sure we were finished. The commander admitted. We'd lost half our forces. We were exhausted. The enemy kept coming. There was no hope. Enemy. Then Colonel Heejin gathered everyone for a speech, Thelnax said. We expected her to talk about honor, about sacrifice, about dying well. Instead, she told us help was coming, he continued. Evacuation ships were 6 hours away. We just had to hold for 6 more hours. A cadet spoke up. But Commander, you said reinforcements couldn't arrive in time. They couldn't, Thelnax confirmed. Not military reinforcements, but civilian transports could. Colonel Heejin had called every ship in range. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, mining vessels, anything that could carry people. She didn't tell us this before because she needed us to fight like there was no hope, the commander explained. Desperate soldiers fight harder than ones waiting for rescue. Those last 6 hours were the worst, Thelnax said. The enemy knew something was happening. They pushed harder. We were down to 300 defenders. Spread too thin. Running out of ammunition. Out of options. The humans held the docking ports, he continued. They knew that's where the evacuation ships would arrive. So they made their stand there. The hologram showed the final battle. A desperate, chaotic fight at the docking bays. The enemy broke through our lines, Thelnax said. They reached the docking areas. The first evacuation ship was arriving. 100 human soldiers stood between 15,000 civilians and the enemy, he stated. 100. Against thousands. They knew they would die. But they also knew the civilians needed 60 more seconds to board the ships. Number 4. Wade Levine. I have get it on Anima. So, they bought 60 seconds, the commander said quietly. They formed a line and held it. No retreat. No surrender. Just humans standing shoulder to shoulder, firing until they couldn't fire anymore. I was there, Thelnax said. Fighting alongside them. I saw them fall, one by one, still firing, still fighting, still singing their songs about home and sacrifice. The evacuation ships arrived, he continued. The civilians got out, all 40,000 of them. Safe. A long silence filled the classroom. Finally, a cadet asked, "How many defenders survived?" 230, Thelnax said. Out of 800. We lost more than half our forces. The humans lost 300 out of 400. But we saved 40,000 civilians, he added. 40,000 people who would have died or been enslaved. That's what the humans fought for. The commander looked at his students. You ask why they're terrifying? They are. They're persistent, relentless, and they refuse to accept defeat. They can endure impossible pain. They can march until their bodies break. They can think their way out of any tactical situation. But you know what's more terrifying? Thelnax asked. They do all of this, endure all this pain, fight through impossible odds, not for glory or conquest. They do it because they believe some things are worth dying for, he said. They fight for their companions. For civilians they've never met. For people of species they barely know. They fight because someone needs protecting. And they're willing to be the ones who do it. He removed his military medallion. It was human-made, awarded for valor at Colony Haven. I fight alongside them because I learned something that day. Humans aren't scary because they're good at war. They're terrifying because they're good people who became excellent at war to protect what they love, Thelnax said. They have all these abilities, all these advantages, and they use them for others. Private Mi-sun Cho didn't hold that junction for glory, he explained. She did it for 200 civilians she'd never met. She was willing to die alone, in pain, terrified, so that strangers could live. That's the human spirit, the commander said. That's what makes them different. Any species can learn to fight. Any soldier can learn to endure. But humans fight for something bigger than themselves. The hologram changed one final time. It showed a current military deployment roster. Another colony needs defending. Pirates are threatening civilian populations. Standard peacekeeping deployment. Fifth, a communication indicator appeared. Admiral Tae-sung Kim, the same sergeant from Kepler Station, now promoted and commanding a fleet. Orders from Admiral Kim, Thelnax said. He's requesting experienced officers for the mission. The commander looked at his students. When I got this order, I accepted immediately. No hesitation. Because I know when humans ask for help protecting civilians, they mean it. They'll walk through hell itself to keep innocents safe. If you ever fight alongside humans, he told the young cadets, remember this. They'll carry you when you're tired. They'll treat your wounds while ignoring their own. They'll hold the line when any reasonable being would retreat. and they'll die to protect you if necessary. Not because you're special, Thelnak said, but because that's who they are. That's what they believe in. A cadet raised her hand nervously. Commander, what if we fight against them? The classroom fell silent. Thelnax's 4 eyes grew hard. Don't, he said simply. Just don't. If you fight against humans, you're not just fighting soldiers, he explained. You're fighting a species that spent thousands of years perfecting warfare. That evolved to outlast anything. That can ignore pain and exhaustion. That thinks creatively and fights desperately. But more importantly, he continued, you're fighting people who believe they're protecting something. And humans fighting for a cause they believe in are the most dangerous force in the galaxy. The commander walked toward the door, then paused. I'll be deploying in 3 days. To fight alongside humans again. To protect another colony of people I've never met. Because I learned from them. Thelnak said. I learned that some things are worth fighting for. Worth bleeding for. Worth dying for. If necessary. That's the real lesson about humans. He concluded. They don't just fight to win. They fight to protect. And they'll teach you to do the same. If you let them. He looked back one final time. Class dismissed. And if any of you want to volunteer for the deployment, you know where to find me. The commander left the classroom. Behind him, the young cadets sat in silence, processing everything they'd learned. Understanding, perhaps for the first time, what it truly meant to be a warrior. Not someone who fights for glory. Not someone who seeks battle. But someone who stands between the innocent and danger. Regardless of the cost. Someone like a human,